Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. Today's guest is the CEO of Andromeda Entertainment, game designer and long-standing public speaker in the industry of consciousness technology. He was featured in Netflix Screenland and the documentary Game Loading, Rise of the Indies. As the lead developer of SoundSelf, he has an intimate understanding of both the needs of independent development studios and the means by which technology can profoundly impact player consciousness. Welcome to the show, Robin Arnott.
Thank you, Matt Belair. Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
It's so great to see you again. Well, we met in Austin when you had the SoundSelf, and I was in the room, and I remember, I think it was Lyle. Shout out Lyle for putting this together and reconnecting. But he's like, you got to try this thing, and he tried to describe it to me, and I was like, okay, you make sound, but then you see it visually. Like, I don't get it. And then you were sitting there, you're hooking everybody up, and then I got to experience it. It was so neat. And fast forward to now, understanding more about what you're doing, what your intention is, exploring gaming, consciousness, the integration. It's such a fascinating view, and I think it's a massive potential to help in mindfulness and consciousness and personal development. So why don't you give the listeners a little bit of background about yourself, who you are, and what you're working on today?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Well, I'll start by sharing, I think that there's something happening, and a lot of us feel there's something happening on the planet. There's something happening through human consciousness. It's taking a lot of different forms, and it requires so many different kinds of expertise. And I hear so many stories of people waking up into a sense of purpose that is tied into changing the state of human consciousness all across the globe. I'm sure that you speak to many people on your podcast who are, and your live stream, who are exactly in this mission. It seems to me that many of us are waking up into this, and we all share the same mission, but we do each share a different frame on it, or different, to use a common metaphor, there's the gem or the crystal, and we're each seeing a different sort of face of it. And for me, the face that I feel I've oriented a lot of my life around, and certainly a lot of my creative energy around, is video games. I've been working in independent video games for about 10 years now. I was a sound designer for games, which makes it all the funnier that I couldn't find a microphone to take this interview with. But I did the sound design on Antichamber and the Stanley Parable and a few other games, and really got a heck of a game design education, especially working under Alex Bruce on Antichamber. And through that process, learned how sound can really profoundly affect player consciousness in a way that they're not tracking. Because we're visual thinkers. We think visually, which means that what you hear gets to bypass what you think. So through that process, I became interested not only in video games, but in how gaming can affect a person's psychology. And then I had a big awakening moment for me, and realized that gaming has the potential, has the power. It's a tool, and how we use this tool is up to the creator. And we can use this tool just like you can use a tool to distract yourself. I think gaming, and we've seen some just like amazing developments in gaming, but I think that it's not very aspirational. What games are trying to do for the most part is distract you, make you feel a little better, engage you in a fantasy, engage you in a power drama or something like that, which is all very good and important. I don't want to push that down at all. It's just we can shoot higher. And what I've seen is that gaming is just an incredibly powerful mechanism for engaging a person in a way. Once you play a game, you're sitting in the rules, and the rules define your consciousness in the moment, which means that we can use gaming to shift a person's consciousness into heightened states, at least temporarily, and perhaps more permanently. We'll see. But that's what I'm building this business around. My own project, SoundSelf, is I think the very first of its kind. It's a video game that acts as a psychedelic. It shifts a person's state of consciousness as they're playing it. And I'm organizing all of my creative energy right now into this business, Andromeda, which is all about finding the other people who are working with gaming technology in this way and helping us leverage the incredible institutions of gaming to bring consciousness shifting technologies to anyone who's interested in ways that are more fun, in ways that are more engaging. I'm not talking about like learn to meditate while you play this game. I'm talking about like the American ideal of gaming, which is like, let's have fun, let's do, this is crazy, this is wow, that's what gaming is impressing people and immersion and surprise and so on. You can do all of that and shift your state of consciousness at the same time. I think that's actually a big part of the issue with people adopting meditation techniques is it's so boring and difficult at first, but a game can help you get past that hump. And a game that like makes meditation learning a little more fun, great. But a game that doesn't even tell you what it's doing, doesn't even like teach you how to meditate, it's just engaging and fun, and the act of playing it shifts your state. To me, that's the ultimate potential of this, at least in my lifetime. For now, we'll see.
Yeah, man, 100%. Well, you kind of just really hit the nail on the head in a few ideas there, really big picture ideas. When you talk about the juggernauts of gaming, and gaming is so massive. I remember being at my friend's house when I first realized that there was millions of YouTubers watching people play video games. And then it dawned on me on how big gaming is. Gaming is absolutely monstrous, and it is absolutely an avenue we up until this point have not considered how we can use this to transform consciousness, to assist kids who want to play games, who want to explore, but you could teach them to explore themselves. And this could work for adults as well. And I think that you made another great point where it doesn't need to be boring. It doesn't mean, when people think about meditation, they think about sitting in a room and it's boring and then their thoughts are going, and it's fair enough. It kind of is like that a little bit, but there's definitely value in it. However, if you can use technology, and we're starting to have great technologies out there, which I'm sure you're aware of many, that are making it a little bit more easier, a little bit more fun. And when you have these little dopamine fixes of getting to the next level, that little game, that little thing to inspire you to keep moving and get that start, man, holy smokes, we can really use this as an extraordinary force. So the first question I want to ask is, how would you see it played out? Let's say you could access all these juggernauts and you would start to design a game or an experience. How would you merge the ideas of consciousness with how the game would work, with the gamification? Like, do you have any ideas on how you'd lay out that framework?
Oh man, a lot of ideas. I'll tell you what though, before we go too deep into that, what I really love to do with you is just do a little short meditation with us and your listeners. If you're listening, please do engage in this. Shall I begin that? And I'll keep it thematically on point here.
Yeah, 100%, man. I don't know if you know this, but when I do the recordings on iTunes, I always bring people through just a deep breath so that they can get centered. So 100%, man. I'm always game.
Thank you. All right, so close your eyes. I'll close my eyes. If you're listening, go ahead, close your eyes. Even you, who's not thinking I'm talking to you, I am talking to you. Take a deep breath in and out. And if you're listening to this live, recognize that you are doing this with many, many other people. There's something magical that happens when we drop into presence together. Tapping into your body. I learned this interesting thing recently, this idea that you don't hop off one thought by just pushing that thought away. You actually have to choose another thought. So we're going to do the same thing right here now. Whatever it is that's bothering you, just like let it fill you. Let it fill you entirely. Welcome it. Don't push it away. Just welcome it. Even trust it. There's something in there for you. With the next exhalation, bring all of your attention. Choose a different thought. And this thought is going to be bringing your attention into your body, your heartbeat, your breath. So you are breathing together and listening together with all these other people. Ask yourself a question. I'm going to offer you the question, and I want you to just pay attention to the answer that comes up for you. The first one that you're trying to hide for yourself. The question is, what game are you playing right now? Don't need to judge it. What game am I playing right now? And with that little bit of awareness, recognize you can choose that game, or you can choose another game. But as with a thought, we can't just go from choosing a game to nothing. We have to choose a different game. So as you come back into your surroundings, invite, and I'll invite for us in this conversation, perhaps something will come up. What game do we want to be playing? So you can open your eyes. And let's let a new game reveal itself for us, if it wants to.
Awesome, man. I love guided meditations because I've never had a poor one. You know, it's just an opportunity to explore yourself and quiet the mind. And when you don't have a regular meditation practice, it's hard to understand the value of shutting off your mind, shutting off just the habitual thought or the first thing you're going to say, rather than allowing that little bit of space, that little bit of calm, that little bit of openness to explore in a new way. It is literally a different form of consciousness. You have different brain waves. There's different things activating in your brain. It's a whole different experience. And as you did that, one thing I didn't even consider until that moment was when we are exploring and you are exploring, and ideally this spirals off into something absolutely phenomenal because I can see the huge potential in combining gaming with consciousness and transformation, is the group coherence effect. And, you know, I just did a podcast with Damien Lafont, and he's a physicist, and he is looking at this Ultrasync where he wants to use the stadiums of football players, soccer players, and all this around the world to coherently think about peace, and then also try that on maybe an individual to start testing on a mass scale global consciousness. And there's great research done at the Global Institute of Noetics, I think that's what it is, and many, and there's so many other ones. So with gaming, you can apply that technique with literally hundreds of thousands or millions of people around the world playing that same game. The applications are endless.
And so you mentioned, like you were talking about how you love guided meditations. I do too, and I love giving them. I think, and I found as I start this business more and more, I like using guided meditations because it does alter your state, but also every guided meditation, every journey you go on is a different altered state, is a different story, is a different framing. And that's, you know, I do this with my investors. I do this with my business colleagues. I do this, you know, we'll sit together, we'll do a guided meditation. Whoever wants to lead will lead, and you just let whatever wants to come through, you know? And I find that helps frame, like I did this guided meditation with my team once where, and I wasn't planning this, but it's just like a visualization of imagining a beam of light coming from your chest and weaving with the chest with a beam of light of everyone else in the group, and then something rising up in the middle. What is that something? And it became a very creative meeting, a very co-creative meeting. And this is actually, and I'm kind of realizing this for the first time, this is exactly how I think about game design. As a game designer, I'm creating the guided meditation for everybody who's out there. Now, I think games or call them interactive experiences that are literally a guided meditation. I just don't think that's interesting. But when you can use the systems of a game to shape a person's consciousness in the way that you do in the guided meditation, I think that is very interesting. And then, to your point, when we use that approach to game design to impact the existing systems of game design, we don't even need to change them that much. But the massively multiplayer online RPG, massively multiplayer game, that's an incredible system. And when you apply this philosophy to that system, what do you create? Like a big part of my mission is to find the game designers out there, probably the young ones, because it's the young ones who are so damn unafraid and don't know what they can't do, and just have them ask them an interesting question. And that question might be, how do you use a game design as a guided meditation? How do you use a game design to shift a state of consciousness? There's so many young game designers who are interested in these things now. Once you ask that question, you take let's say you've been developing massively multiplayer games for a while. Let's say you're really interested in action games. All of that doesn't go away. It just becomes the vocabulary from which you exercise a deeper state of reflection and get to share in that.
Yeah, man, 100%. Well, I put myself on mute because I'm typing notes, and I want to use the language you're using because I've found in researching the brain and consciousness in my own way, which is probably the polar opposite of what it takes to code. I've seen coding and my cousin does it, and my brain is just like not adopting that naturally, let's just say. But you spoke about rule sets, and I think that's fascinating when you talk about rule sets and a system to alter, like you're within this system, this framework, and you get to create that framework and those rule sets to alter the consciousness. And what you need to start with is the intention. When you do hypnosis, you need to figure out what the intention is. Do you want to have more confidence? Do you want to overcome public speaking? Do you want to win this championship in sport? Do you want to have the belief system to create this business and know that you can succeed, whatever that is? And you reverse engineer that psychology and that meditation for that experience. Now, apply that to gaming when it's so immersive and you have other elements, because you have to do this all in your mind. And that's why people are so resistant, because they don't know how.
That's why it's so hard, yeah.
And at first, they feel like they're not doing anything. When I go to the gym and I squat, I definitely know I'm doing something. But when I'm doing the mental rehearsal, sometimes it's like, is this affecting anything? I don't know. But that's why you have to do it over time, because something will happen. You're like, holy crap, this stuff is for real. And that's why everybody's got to experience that. But in gaming, you could probably experience it without that. And you can add these other rule sets and these, what am I trying to say? Like auditory, digital, all of these actual visceral senses, and activate them in a specific way to aim at a specific result. So I'm wondering if you could speak on how you might be able to integrate audio, visual, even VR and sense to create either a trance state, which is super easy. Look at kids. They're all in trance states.
Oh
and that's a part of it, right? Accelerated learning happens in trance states. So go ahead.
Yeah. So, wow, there's a lot there. So yeah, gaming, more than any other medium, more than music, it integrates so many different technologies and techniques and approaches, which is why I think it has one of the greatest potentials for impacting humanity, if we're using it correctly. As far as the how to do that, I mean, I've spent the last 8 years or so of my life asking myself that question and exploring. My creative approach is, I think there's two ways of approaching a problem, basically. There's looking at the problem, and what problem you're looking at, and you ask it questions, and you implement the answers, and that's basically the scientific process. If I'm to simplify it in some way, or find like the core effort at the center of it, you're looking at a problem, you're asking a question. Another way, which we don't really, it doesn't come so naturally to us in the West because we don't have an embedded practice of this, is channeling. You find silence and you let what comes through come through, and you yourself are a tool, a finely honed tool to execute on whatever is coming through, sort of like the guided meditation thing. So My tool being gaming, which I see as I love this tool, because it does integrate all these pieces together. And asking myself this question, SoundSelf didn't come to me because I was trying to figure something out, like how do I alter a person's trance state? It just came to me. It just appeared in my mind. And I actually, for people who want to make experiences that could shift the state of a person, I mean, maybe you'll, if you go in with that end and like ask some interesting questions, you'll come out with interesting answers. But I really think the most divine stuff comes through a moment of inspiration. We recognize that in the arts, and we recognize that in music. So for me, SoundSelf came kind of fully formed in my mind. And as I've been working on it, it's sort of the backwards process to the more scientific process or a reductive process. It came relatively fully formed, and as I've worked on it, I found answers coming from it to questions I didn't even know I had. So my obsession with trance and my obsession with abstraction and my various aspects of the game design that just occurred to me, I didn't know why they'd work, and then they did work, and it's only years later that I understood how they worked. And it's for me, it's actually looking back at my career this last 10 years and kind of taking notes on what was coming through more intuitively is the best way I can, the best structure I've come up with that I can offer to other people for how to use this mechanism for that. So here's what I've got, and it's my best shot. We have to disengage the mind. We have to we have to disengage the mind, the chatter, the ceaseless identification with something, with this, the worrying, and so on. And what I found, let me describe SoundSelf a little bit, and then I'll explain why I think it works the way it does. So SoundSelf is a virtual reality experience where you are lying down as you play this game. There's no controller or anything like that, and there's no visuals you might recognize. It's entirely abstract. But there is a microphone, and as you tone, like that, it starts to dance with you and play with you and respond to you and build music around your vocalization and harmonize with you. That's the essential thing. It produces sounds that harmonize with your voice. And the result of this, now when I first started designing this, I couldn't tell you why a design like X would lead to Y. But the result of this was an experience where people would come out of it feeling deeply entranced. After years of development, they started comparing it to DMT. I regularly see people coming out of it having had their first mystical experience. Why is it doing that? I have some vague answers that this is my best shot. I think a big part of why it's doing it is the breathing in and toning out gets people into a yogic breath. The vocalizing like that actually stimulates the vagus nerve, which tells your body, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe. The visuals, by being abstract, give your mind nothing to hook onto, and it's overwhelming, it's visually overwhelming, it's musically overwhelming, and the result of that is that you can't mind wander. There's just too much stimulus. So as soon as you mind wander a little bit, firstly, there's nothing to hook your mind onto because it's abstract. And secondly, you're overwhelmed, so the mind wander appears and then just disappears. And actually, there are some people who are more like addicted to mind wandering, and those people have a very, very hard time with SoundSelf at first. They'll suffer in the experience until they let go. And inevitably they do let go. And when they do, I see these people go from like tensing their hands and like feeling stressed to like laughing and crying because, maybe for the first time they're experiencing in their adulthood, they're experiencing a moment without having to force something, without trying to do something, without trying to figure something out. As soon as the game design tells you have to figure me out, you're engaging the mind again, and you're engaging a sense of identification with the person. So it's a system that invites a recurring set of action that stimulates the body in a certain way. The voice already exists in the space between where you are identified with yourself. That voice is so familiar, it's mine, it sounds like me, but also it's out there, especially when we have these sounds that are harmonizing with it. And so it takes something that's deeply mine and externalizes it and puts it out here, and it's playing with you and dancing with you, but you're not controlling it per se. It seems to have an intelligence of its own. So something about that, something about taking something that feels like mine, externalizing it, giving me nothing to hook onto, and watching a dance that I know and feel to be mine, but also mysteriously something else, drops people into a state of deep surrender, and drops people into a state of surrendering to the mystery. And there's always mystery. Every single moment there's like your universe is mysterious. You're just habituated to focusing on the parts of it that you think you understand. But most of what's going on in any given moment is total fucking mystery. So a design that reorients your attention from what you can understand to surrendering the mystery, that is more likely to induce a mystical experience. I hope that makes sense.
Bro, 100%. If you deduce what it takes to create a mystical experience, or even an open-mindedness, or to change your consciousness from beta, alpha, theta, to do all those things, you're integrating all of those things. When you talk about not having anything to hold on to, the mind is constantly looking for a reference point, and then it's jogging its memories and thinking about the future,
right.
all those things. But you're
engaged
creating an environment, it can't do it. So visually, you're fully immersed. You can't really escape it. And the other massive element is integrating the breath. So the body is actually functioning as it should, and you're experiencing the visual sense in a different way and the audio sense in a different way. And so there's no way that you can come back to cling anything. And that's what opens up. And have you done any studies on what happens to the brainwaves while they're in this?
A little bit. We've seen a huge peak in alpha, huge. A little bit of a peak in beta, and excuse me, not beta, early beta, like about 25 to 30 hertz, and a little bit of a peak in a boost in theta. Now, theta, for those listening who don't know, alpha is associated with relaxation, rest, your body entering I always get sympathetic and parasympathetic confused, but the nervous system state where you're refreshing and relaxing, resting. So we see about a 300% increase in alpha. We see a small boost in theta. Theta is associated with dreaming. And then we see a small increase in early beta, and that's associated with new ideas and new connections. So, and we see that especially at the end of the experience. So the end of the experience, we invite you to close your eyes and enter a Shavasana. Now, if you've ever wondered why they do a Shavasana yoga, I've seen, to my surprise, in SoundSelf, like what happens to the brainwaves when you enter into your Shavasana. It's actually the time where your brain integrates, and it's where you go deepest. And in SoundSelf, that's where you go deepest, is at the end. You have this crazy psychedelic experience, then you close your eyes and you just rest.
Yeah, man, 100%. And I can see so many different applications for this, because you can think about a big organization, right? And we know from studying the mind and from studying organizations and just even talking to your neighbor, that most people go through the day, and then there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of go, and they're not that productive. And it's highly recommended that say, hey, just go out there and do some deep breathing, or you need 15 minutes of mindfulness, or you need a 5-minute break. The challenge is that most of our society now is not really trained in understanding,
not oriented to that,
their brainwave state, right? They just, they're aware of it exists. They might have gone to a meditation, but they don't really get it. But what
it's really unintuitive to our society. Yeah, our society trains us to push. There are times where that's really adaptive, but if you're trying to be creative, and so many of the problems we have in our world, I think for anyone listening to this, I bet most of the problems they're trying to solve, if you boil them down, are creative problems. And if you're trying to be creative, you have to not only take a break, but you have to drop into the dream state. You have to, and ideally, you're dropping into a visionary state as well. That's when you're making the most connections.
Yeah, 100%. And so, I worked a little bit with Muse back in the day, the Muse meditation headband, which I'm sure you're aware of. It's a
Yeah,
fantastic.
that's cool.
They started kind of gamifying a little bit of meditation and consciousness through different experiences, measuring your brainwave states. So check them out for sure. I had Chris Amony on the podcast at the beginning, man. He's like episode 20, just out in Toronto. But the application of that, we're just talking about how do we get this into corporations and into, where there's a lot of employees. But if there's like a SoundSelf there and it's like, look, after you've done an hour or an hour and a half, and then you go 10 minutes into this, and what it's going to do is it's going to declutter, clear, help them go into that experience with literally no training, no effort, change the brainwave state. Then boom, you come back in and you're fully refreshed, because that's what happens when you change those states. And the application to this, back to my original question, if you had like an intention and you're using all these modalities, and I'm sure this is where you're envisioning it, but let's just say it could be a problem, and then that's the rule set you put in there. You use the same parameters of the sound. You could add binaural beats, you could add visuals, you could all these different things, but then the parameters might be for something a little bit more focused. And that's how maybe an individual or even the group or even the board gets together and they go through that experience. And then after that, then they share, this is what came out. This is what I came out. And the group is now, and even in the field, who knows, I don't know if there's any measurable science on this, but it makes sense that there would be a group field actually coming from the bodies when everybody goes in that state with that same intention, able to drop in and to hold all in the same intention. They're going to definitely have a group coherence effect and problem solve at a much higher degree.
Well, Mikey Seagal is working. Do you know Mikey Seagal? Have you interviewed him? Or do you know his work?
No, I don't.
Very interesting man. He's been working on I'd call it a game. I don't think he'd call it a game, but it's an immersive experience that uses your biodata. And it uses your biodata and hooks that up to the biodata of the people around you. So you have a shared experience feeling one another's breath, feeling one another's heartbeat. And it's a guided experience. So I don't know what the measurable, like what happens when you get a group together from a measurable perspective, but certainly when you get to share in an immersive experience like that touches you into your body and touches you into the wisdom that's not your mind, and which isn't to say the wisdom that's in your mind isn't important. It is. It's just like we're pretty good at that already, So touching into the wisdom of the heart and the wisdom of the breath and touching into that together, and suddenly you have a shared experience where you are one body beating together. And it's not only like suddenly it's no longer just about where do I go, it's about where do we go together, and how do we feel together. And you get this highly empathic experience, like I've been very inspired in my designs by psychedelics, but I think a place that is just as ripe for drawing inspiration from for gamings is empathogens like MDMA or like certain kinds of breath work. So how do we then the question becomes, how do we create game systems that bring us into a kind of embodied syncopatic biorhythm together so that we can feel each other's heart more deeply. And when we can feel one another's heart more deeply, we can make decisions from a more compassionate and a less dog eat dog place. And those decisions are more adaptive for the kinds of problems we face in the world right now.
Yeah, man, 100%. I see the applications for this to be literally endless. I was chatting with Lyle before we jumped on the show, and he was telling me that he just went to this place somewhere where they did a full VR, and it was a workout. And what they would have is you'd have like these basic exercises, and you would have to play the game like shoot a thunderbolt or whatever, and it would be a lat pull down and a squat. Then, as we were talking about it, I just put myself in that experience because I've been in a VR before and I realized how powerful it was. And then the first thing that I thought is I'm in a simulation. I must be, because I was like, all you need is a suit that you put on that has sensors. And then now you have that whole sensory experience. Now there's a suit that's being made that he showed me. And so I thought about with this is just phase one. Like this is the Atari version of what's capable with like
it totally is. Yeah.
with exponential growth on technology. So then I go, okay, I go up to this thing in like a few years time and I go, I'm a skateboarder. I want balance. I want explosiveness and I want this. And it sets up different exercises through gamification. And I'm not even thinking about what my body's doing. I'm just reacting to the game like Dance Dance Revolution. So that's a physical application for it. But I think that there's literally endless applications when you take that container, the rule sets, the ability to transform consciousness through all of these senses and reverse engineer it with that in mind. So the question that I wanted to ask is like, what do you see if you could start sprouting these things up? What would you see like a very, not the maximum, but ideally a lot of things that will be implemented and integrated? Like what would you see as a big picture vision implemented?
Wow, that's a great question. So I don't want to miss a shout out to Blackbox VR. That's the virtual reality workout that we were talking. Lyle and my team and I did that together, and like, man, like it takes so much willpower for me to go to the gym and lift some weights or something, and they used gaming technology to make me want to do something that usually I don't want to do. So we shout out to them. They're doing really great work, and they've got their first space to do that is in San Francisco. So I'm sure many of your listeners are there. Definitely recommend trying it. What is the ultimate expression of this? Okay. All right, I'm gonna go off the deep end on this one.
Where I like it.
Yeah, I'm going to make an assertion that I believe to be true, and some of your listeners may not believe to be true, but it's just, this is what the universe appears to be, as far as I can tell. It's just not what it appears to be. It's what we experience in our day-to-day reality is a tiny sliver of what reality is. And it not only that, but it's defined or constructed in part by our technologies. You know, if you like the universe to a Protestant American, and look, even if you don't identify as a Christian, your culture is fundamentally Protestant, which means that the core of your being, unless you grew up somewhere else or unless you've done like a lot of training or something like that, the core of your being is Protestant. So a Protestant culture like ours is a way of looking at the universe. It's a moralistic way of the universe. It believes in cause and effect. It believes in a family and hard work. There's all sorts of things that our lens are and I'll call it a Protestant lens. I imagine that'll be a little what's the word? People won't like it, but whatever. But like our Protestant lens it does frame our reality. It does create our reality. It helps us identify, like, even define what is real versus what's not real. Like I said, there's so much going on in any given moment. Well, what seems to be real for you is based on where you put your attention and how you know how to place your attention. Actually, here's another little, just a short guided meditation for anyone right now. Just like tune in to reality right now. And so notice all the things that are obviously real. You know, my voice, perhaps the seat you're sitting on. I'm looking at a little money tree in front of me right now. That's pretty clearly real. All the things that you know how to identify and label and so on. And now see if you can shift your attention to everything else. Just like the stuff that you're used to ignoring, you know, the random thoughts, the little blips of color that come up in your subconscious, the slight changes in the rhythm of your heartbeat, that buzzing sensation through your whole being. All of that is just as real. And I don't even think it's less important, you know? It's just like we are trained to understand certain parts of a reality and pay attention to certain parts of reality and not others. So in order to answer the question, like, okay, I'm going to root us back in the question, what's the ultimate potential of this? All right, so what's our reality right now? It's basically a Protestant reality. Now, how different is that to, and animistic reality where, and you can touch into this right now. So again, drop into your experience of being and allow everything in your reality to have a soul, to be alive. And I find that that's more of a process of allowing. I don't have to pretend it. If I just grant consciousness and some sense of being, you know, I'm looking at my desk and I language this as desk, but I could just as easily say this is the spirit of desk appearing to me. I mean, it's very easy for you to do that with my voice. You know, you hear Robin's voice. You could say that's an object, that's Robin's voice, or you could say that's the spirit of Robin appearing to me through voice. So an animistic reality is a very, very, very different reality to live in. Now, the kinds of technologies you might make as an animist are very different from the kinds of technologies you might make as a Protestant. And I think that we're undergoing right now a radical shift in how we experience reality. I've had experiences where what I thought was reality on ayahuasca, just to give a little context, where what I thought was reality was just disassembled, and I saw and felt beings come in and come between everything and change everything, and like it was like they were cleaning. It's like I was a machine and they took me apart and they cleaned me and they put me back together slightly differently. So once you've witnessed something like that, reality is just different, you know? And so from the place where that's the reality I live in, and I live in a reality where there are, you know, nth dimensional beings or whatever that I can't comprehend or perceive, and I live in a reality where there's much more going on than just the objects I see and how I can use them and so on, and that influences how I can make use of the tools that I have. So I think the real answer to your question, what's the ultimate potential of this? Right now, it's basically limited by the belief set and by the experiential reality of the people making these technologies. Now, when you're a Protestant and you're living in the material world, the beautiful and powerful material world we've created, that sets a limit to what you can create. You know, I'm creating something for other people who perceive the world in roughly the same way, you know? Like that right there is a design limitation based on the idea of what a person is, based on the idea of who you are and who they are, based on your own perceptual reality and what you project their perceptual reality to be. But once we have a shift in consciousness, and once we're living in a cultural context where there is a shared understanding of that shift in consciousness, what we can create is just radically different. So I don't know what those technologies are, but I do know they're going to be very, very different, and they're going to do things for people, I hope. I was about to say do things to people, but I hope for people that we can't even begin to fathom right now. And there's no reason to believe that a technology that has been around for, you know, thousands of, and maybe even, hundreds of thousands of years, like cooking, or a modern technology like virtual reality gaming, that any of these things can be different and can have different potential and ends when they are used by a consciousness that just has a different sense of what reality is. So that's my long way of saying I don't know.
Oh man, well, you know what, I was able to follow you because I've had those experiences. I've had them through meditation, I've had them through psychedelics and ayahuasca, and when I've had those experiences, what happened was that the reality that I experienced was much more real and vivid and immersive and powerful than the existence of being alive. It shattered everything that I thought I knew about anything. And my brain and my mind cannot comprehend any of the experience. It's just something that you know, that I went through, and I could try to put words to something that there are no words for. You know, one of the examples that I use would be like, if you had that experience and you gave the experience to a duck, and the duck became fully conscious, and the duck could ask questions about all the different stuff. You could put a duck in a VR, explain that to him, and then all of a sudden the duck, you'd be like, all right, my little friend, you're going to go back to being a duck now. And here you go. And as he's going back to being a duck, he's going to lose all the language, all the understanding, all the experience. But it would be like, even more accurately, probably being a duck on a planet he's never even seen before. He would have no reference point. You know what I mean? We have no reference point for anything. So where it could go could be anywhere. And I think that the beginning point of this might need to be like peace. You know, I think that when I talk to the elders, and I like to look at all views of the world, because there's so much going on now. We have an opportunity through technology like never before to make such a massive impact. Yet as a species, I don't know what I would consider to be, if we're in a technology, or if we're an advanced species. What is an advanced species? Is it one that murders each other in mass numbers? You know, how do we move beyond this warring culture where we have these individual sets of beliefs and cultures where we battle each other, rather than come to the most primal initiative? And I don't know if it's like, what is it? Michael Miyakaku? What's his name? You know what I'm talking about? He does somebody's going to know it. But it's the Miyakaku fellow, and I'm butchering his name. I apologize. But I believe it was him that wrote about the types of civilizations. And I believe type 3 is where you go beyond warring. And I feel like even this technology would have implications for that, because it requires an expansion of consciousness to let go of all you hold dear that might not be absolutely correct or coherent in the world. So one of the examples, you know, having a podcast in religion and spirituality, and I know people who are Catholic people, and I like them, and they're great people, and they're involved in the community, and they do all kinds of great stuff. Now, on a bigger scope, if you look at, you know, some of the things that they've done throughout history, not so good. And it shouldn't be a battle versus a Catholic versus a Muslim versus something else, or white or black or whatever nonsense game we're playing. We need to go beyond that, and having a consciousness expanding experience that goes beyond your own predefined rule sets and beliefs and experiences allows a doorway and a space for compassion, for more understanding, for wanting to know more about the other one, then impose your view or way of the world on someone else. And when you talked about the gaming thing, what it made me think of is when you come into the world, you have like the physical body, you've got the console, and you get to work with that, but you also get you also get the programming from your peers, from whatever your dad tells you, that's going to go in there, from whatever your mom is telling you, that's going to go in there, from the space that you grew up in, from your culture, from all of that stuff. You know, you don't grow up in, you know, a Muslim country and become, you know, a Catholic usually, because it just doesn't make any sense. It's not what the culture is doing. And also
you don't have cultural context to be able to embed that in your reality. You can't really be it's difficult to be a practicing Catholic in, I wouldn't even know what city to give an example as, but yeah, it's your core belief system that you grew up with, and it's the cultural context that reinforces that. And you can have like a core belief system that shifts, but then if you're not vigilant, the cultural context will pull you back into kind of a consensus, which is, I don't necessarily even think that's a bad thing. That's part of what stops us all from going crazy. But it does, to access the kind of states we're talking about with an acknowledgement that, and I think it's useful to look at our culture and be grateful, you know, like even all the warring and the like the commodification of attention and what have you. Like I find it's, if I shift into a place of judging that, it's like judging my parents, you know, for not knowing what I know, or for not having discovered, or judging my ancestors for not having figured out how to reduce their carbon footprint, or how to drive around in a car. So whatever the thing that seems to be a problem is right now, that's just like our theoretical ancestry, or our like our cognitive ancestry. Does that make sense? Right? Or our cultural ancestry, and we have to build on that, because you can't separate from it. I mean, maybe you can a little bit, but I found for myself that, like, the more I try to be like, Gah! These people I'm surrounded by don't get it, the more I miss out on the wisdom that's evolved thousands and thousands and thousands of years that I wasn't there for, that I don't get. And the less effective I am, because I don't actually have compassion for it. So like think of the worst thing about your culture. Like, you could probably find it, you know. It's the thing that screams at you is like, the people around me are so stupid and awful, and I've got it figured out and they don't. If we can have compassion for that and love it and be curious about it, you know, be like, hey, what are you trying to teach me? Rather than like, I've got it figured out, you know. I find that these things work together with whatever the newer understandings that are coming through in your transcendent experiences are. Like, so whatever you learn from asking the question, like, why do we go to war with people? Why do we kill one another? Why do we do whatever, you know? I have my own things. But if I can approach that and like welcome it to be as it is, and accept it, and accept that it can teach me, and then like bring in the learning, then I can create a technology or something, whatever. Like, I'm a technologist, so like that's like what I can do. But if you're a cook, then I can create the food, then I can create the whatever, not to try to fix that problem, but to actually like connect these two worlds, integrate them or something.
Yeah, man. Well, I think that's a really important point that you made, that it's not to like, and I think you touched on it in your TED Talk, and I invite everybody to go check that out. What's the title of it so they can find it?
It's
I'll send it to me. I got it. Let me see here. TED Talk. Let me pull it up. It is, you might hear it in the background.
Video games for a more mindful reality or something like that.
Designing video games for a more mindful world with Robin Arnott. TEDx.
Yeah,
so I invite people to check that out, because you make a lot of really great points. And I think that's important, not to put it down or say it's bad, but we need to move to a new understanding, because we have a lot of harm through old systems, old beliefs, and it gives us an opportunity to make change, to affect change. And there's never been a time on this planet where we have more resources to make change, to see a problem, and to move toward a solution. With all of the money and technology and influence that's coming out of Silicon Valley, if they, took, 1/3 of those people and said, all right, our goal is peace. Our goal is cleaning the oceans. Our goal is whatever the case may be, improving education. And we bring some like humanitarian missions in a very real way, and look for solutions. The power and influence, and the way that the internet works now, it's immediate. And if it makes sense and it works and it's a better system, we're just going to adopt it as a culture. And when you make it fun, and that's what gaming does.
We'll adopt it as a culture only if it actually integrates with what came before, I believe. And I think this is the danger of, and we've all been through it, like you discover something, you have some, and like suddenly like, oh my God, I've been treating the people around me like garbage. And it doesn't work to then like point the finger and say like, hey, everybody stop treating people around you like garbage. It just doesn't, for whatever reason. And it's like, this is the thing I come back to again and again and again and again, is like, it is so tempting to come in and try to change our culture or change technology or whatever. Like, I talk about changing video games, changing the institution of video games, but I would be like 1/30th as effective if I believed that there was something wrong with video games. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think I love like shooting video games, and I play XCOM 2, which is all about like big burly men with guns killing aliens, and I love it. I think it's good. You know, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And as soon as we come in to change something because it's wrong or broken, we just become less effective, you know? So, like, to me, the one thing of this, it actually makes me like so sad. We get these downloads and they're for us. And we have to bring it to the world. But like the only way it works is to love the world as it is while you're bringing it, you know? And so like I like caution people, or I want to caution people, like if you believe you have something to change the world, you have to love the world first as it is. And this is something that it just like, I don't know, man. There are so many ways. Here's an example. You know, you mentioned there's so many ways that our civilization causes harm, right? And that's true. But every one of those ways that causes harm was an answer to a problem that felt more pressing in the moment, and was an adaptation in the moment. And like we have to have compassion for that, you know. Or maybe I'm coming in and being like hard against the thing that comes in hard, you know. Like maybe I'm being a hypocrite right now, but that's just, it's a place I have a lot of like I feel my heart a lot.
Well, I definitely agree with your perspective and the way that you're coming about it, to accept the world as it is. And there's an opportunity to improve it, you know, with your company.
Always.
You know, if you chose the route of making a game with the sole intention to make as much money as you wanted and to make it the most fun, that's okay. That would be your choice. My suggestion is that if we can inspire people culturally around the world through education, through whatever means, like when you watch something, you get a result. If you watch a horror movie, it's going to affect your consciousness in a certain way.
Totally.
You know, if you're talking about the video game you're talking about, it's not a bad thing, right? But when my child's born, I'm not going to let a 3-year-old play a shooting game until they're at a certain thing, because it affects the quality of their consciousness. Now, if there are games that are in existence that will improve their quality of consciousness, help them understand themselves, I'm saying that there's a lot of opportunity for people to move towards that way of thinking. Not wrong if someone else is doing it that way, and don't spend your time judging them. The suggestion, there's a ton of areas where we can look at problems that we're facing as a humanity, you know, because the thing is, like, some things are not great. Like, I look at the things from a systematic point of view, you know, like you look at incarceration, just one small thing in the States, incarceration. You have the most incarcerated people on the planet, and it's a private business. That's not good. That creates all kinds. That's not the most efficient, effective, what's it like? Moral.
It's not the most beautiful way that we can do it.
Right. We can improve that. We can do a better job of that, you know, and that's the thing. It's like, okay, cool. And what you're suggesting is don't push it under, don't say it didn't exist. Like, that's a part of it. Now, what I'm suggesting is, like, now we build that thing from what we know to the better thing, to whatever that is. And what that requires, though, and you alluded to it a little bit earlier, is this end of competitive thinking. And one of the things that people sometimes talk about, New Earth or 5D or whatever, I just like to think about it as cooperative thinking. Not from what can I get, but how can I contribute to my community? You know, what does that guy need down the road? And that's what you're doing with your job. You know, and it's not wrong if anyone else does it any other way and they want to do it that way, that's fine. But you're choosing to be intentional about what you do. You're choosing, and you're saying, you know what, I see an opportunity that I think I can affect positive change. And that comes from being, you know, a little bit for having values, for wanting to contribute, to wanting to live a life well expressed. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And so that's learned and cultivated through the individual. And if we can create spaces that allow that, and actually Lyle wrote a question that I thought was really, really good, and I wanted to bring it up to you. Let me pull it up because I thought it was worded well.
Man, you got to bring Lyle onto this podcast because he's an interesting guy. We've been talking about.
He's going to be there. So this is how he worded it, and I'm going to add on to what I think about it. But he goes, what is the modern sanctuary, and how do you see our younger generations adopting technology and spirituality in a communal environment? And And here again, it's like when you go to different spaces, you get different experiences. If you sign up for the military and you're going to war, you're going to get a certain experience. If you sign up to go for a swim, you're going to get a different experience. If you sign up to do a meditation, you're going to get a different experience. So what is the possibility of creating these empowering containers, which you could do virtually through gaming, that create a container for accelerated learning, changing altered states, even like to a psychedelic experience, and communal peace and harmony and respect for one another. And from my background in martial arts, that's one of the things. You go into the gym and it's respect for teacher, respect for self, respect for your classmate. And it's a simple way of, I don't know how to word it, like being a moral human, not necessarily good. And it's not to judge the person down the street as being a crazy lunatic. That's allowed to be in this simulation too. The idea is that's your cultivation. And if you can steer that way, it's probably going to be a little bit more meaningful and experience. And it's up to us, but the containers allow that transformation to happen.
Yeah, I think it's just a more beautiful way to be. And you know, this is one of the things video games offer. So we live in a rule set. We live in a game, and the game that we live in right now is one that rewards certain things. It rewards profit. It rewards individualism. It rewards it not only rewards, but it, like everywhere you look, validates this way of seeing. This kind of comes back to, I keep coming back to this, just like, you know, the Protestant frame versus the animistic frame versus the like whatever fifth dimensional ayahuasca frame. We're all playing a game at every level. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know if there's a level that we're not playing a game, or I certainly don't believe human consciousness is capable of not playing a game. I might be wrong about that, but it seems to be like fundamental to psychology that we're playing games upon games upon games upon games upon games. And if you have like, I'm trying this belief on. I'm not sure I believe it, but I'm trying it on. I imagine that if you think you have a moment where you're not playing a game anymore, it's just like you've released yourself of one layer of the game. There's always more layers. There seems to be. And our internal games that we play are a reflection of the external games that we're playing. And when we play a game that's an intentional context to try a different rule set, then it can change who we are. And choosing the games that we play and choosing the games that we create, you know, you don't have to be a game designer as a podcaster. You're creating a space for people to think in a certain way, and there's kind of a game to that. You know what I mean? Maybe game isn't the best term for it, but there's this thing going on where you're interfacing with the world, and people are listening to you in a certain way, and they listen to you differently to if they were listening to a piece of fiction, or they listen to you differently than they might listen to like a different personality. So like each of us, we create games for other people, and in our work we create games for other people, and in our culture we're co-playing and co-creating a game that then our children learn how to play, and that becomes part of their psychology. And I do believe that the world of gaming has just like this really, I think once people are thinking about this intentionally rather than just unconsciously creating the things that they're interested in, I think the next generation of creators is going to make just like really amazing things that we can't imagine. You know, it's almost, we take it for granted that we can't imagine the world 50 years or 60 years from now. If you're aware of what's going on technologically, if you're aware of what's going on kind of spiritually, you know, we're having massive spiritual shifts. We just can't imagine it. But it does seem to me like we're reaching a tipping point, you know, where the pace of acceleration of change it's getting faster and faster. It used to be that your culture would play the same game for tens of thousands of years. The same game for tens of thousands of years. There's something beautiful in that. But now we're playing a different game every few months together, you know? The way, I don't know, how familiar are you with spiral dynamics and integral psychology?
Like none.
Oh my God, this is so exciting. This is my jam. All right. I don't know if I want to get too deeply into it right now, but basically we look at the evolution of human consciousness, and it follows a certain kind of spiral path. And there are these distinct stages, you know. You don't sort of gradually fade from a magical thinking way of looking at the world into an autocratic way of looking at the world, into a tribalist way of looking at the world. You know, these are stages of human psychology that shift very suddenly, and our culture can bring people into a certain shift. But then it seems to me like the acceleration is just getting faster and faster. And I think as people start seeing these technologies as a way to like open up the greatest potential of the people who are interacting with them, and for those of us who are, I mean, all of us are designing culture in a way, but those of us who are doing it intentionally, it's exponentially more powerful. And it releases the creativity of the next generation, which would, you know what I mean? It's just like a waterfall. It's like an explosion happening right now. That is my lens on this gaming.
Well, there's so many, like when you talk, it's interesting because you make me think about things that the same thing in a little bit of a different way. And it's so great. What it came up for me is like, you're saying game, and Alan Watts talks about, you know, the meaning of life, and he talks about, you know, it being a game, and the idea is supposed to have fun. We're supposed to have fun, but we're going around stressed out about all these different things. How do you get your consciousness to a place where you actually are having fun? But another way that I think it was brilliantly put is by Bill Hicks. I'm going to read it because it's so worth it. But I'm sure you've heard this before, but it's like, the world is like a ride in an amusement park. And when you choose to go on it, you think it's real, because that's how powerful our minds are. The ride goes up and down, around and around. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored, and it's very loud, and it's fun for a while. Many people have been on the ride a long time, and they begin to wonder, hey, is this real or is it just a ride? And other people have remembered, and they come back to us and say, hey, don't worry, don't be afraid ever, because this is just a ride. And I think it's the same way to think about it in a game, in that experience. And it can be more fun. It can be more from like a problem solving. I remember learning something from David Lombear once, and he's just like, you know, don't see them as problems, just see them as like, you know, puzzles. And I was like, oh my God, that's such a better way to see it. It's like, this is the puzzle. And each game has a harder and harder puzzle, but we have the emotional aspect of this game, which is why it can be hard. And we also have memory so that we can learn. But what happens is we kind of get stuck in that little piece of data that was really challenging, and we're not able to move past. So we need to learn these.
So then we're playing the same game we were playing 10 years ago, and it was like, you don't need to be playing that game anymore.
Yeah, 100%.
Trauma does.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, what I wanted to ask you was, you know, what do you see as far as like the integrations of AI, virtual reality? You know, I think it's going to be a really interesting thing. Like when Lyle and I were talking about the workout game, I just thought about how it would adapt through being able to be fed so much information about the best workouts, the best things to the individual as an artificial intelligence with a full-on virtual experience to provide me with the greatest workout of all time done through science. And I was like, oh my goodness, if you're measuring brainwave states and what's happening in the mind for accelerated learning even, you're like, oh, we're going to go through this documentary or this book, and you could add elements of this in certain ways to experience a documentary, a book, learning, education, music, art. You know, it's not fully as immersed now, but they're using VR for Formula One racing. Obviously, they're using it for football players, and that's just VR. You know, there are so many other elements to like what you are suggesting, and there's other ways to integrate in very interesting and powerful technology to accelerate the learning even more.
Wow. Here, can you help me boil that down into like like if you can boil that down into like just one or two sentences, because there's so much there for me to think about.
Yeah, man, that was my rant, but I could kind of focus on something. But the name too that actually came to me in the break was about the civilizations was Michio Kaku. So my apologies, he's a brilliant man. I always mess up his name, so I'm going to remember that. But I guess the question would be, from your perspective, also to the other thing that I wanted to share about understanding the mind and you from coding, because you talk about rule sets, from studying consciousness and psychology and hypnosis and all these different things, that's what it taught me to do. Neurolinguistic programming was to change the software of my body. And when you can do that, you have much more freedom in the experience to be able to shift your perspective, your consciousness, your way of being, your breath, your brainwave state. That's what that's actually doing. Then you can pick out the coding that you prefer. Oh, I prefer this and this and this. And you can learn through very easy techniques to install that in your consciousness. Now, I've thought about many different applications of how you could do that through a VR experience. You know, some people have affirmations. You see some subliminal messages, right? We're getting subliminal messages all the time. They're just not probably ideal for us. It's eat the all-you-can-eat $10 KFC. That's why if I were American, I'd be the fattest person there, because I'd be like, $10 all-you-can-eat, I can't pass that up. I'm just going to be, everything else is going out the window, and I'm eating all the chicken and I'm eating all the ice cream. But if we can learn how to hypnotize ourselves, to encode our programming, and once that shifts, you're changing the rule sets, and you're going to change the experience within the game. Once you do that, it has to happen.
So I remember reading recently, I wish I could remember where I read it because it was really interesting, but it pointed out that the way we understand ourselves and our bodies, we inherit a metaphor set from the preeminent technology available to us. So when steam was you had steam engines moving, which were how our economy operated, right? We thought about the body, or our culture thought about the body as a machine, and we thought about pressure building up, and this informed the nascent approach to psychology. Like we even talk about psychology this way, like oh, I have so much pressure building up, I have to blow off some steam. Or we kind of think about trauma in this way a little bit, right? Like there's a buildup of pressure which moves something. So I don't know to what degree it's true or not, but it is interesting to me how our current technological, the height of our technologies is computers and artificial intelligence and code and so on. And through that lens, we've learned so much about our psychology and so much about our bodies. And you hear people talk about it right now. They talk about my programming. Or they talk about, like with neurolinguistic programming, we talk about reprogramming. And I wonder, like, what are the limitations of this way, of this metaphor set? Like what happens when the metaphor set is the blockchain or something like that? What does that teach us about who we are? What happens when artificial intelligence is as developed as it's? I mean, this stuff's growing so fast. How does that change who we are, and how does that change how we relate to ourselves? And who am I if I relate to myself? I think actually, I'll tell you where I think this was from. I think this is from the book *Sapiens* by Yuval Harari, or it might have been his second book. Both amazing books. Highly recommend them. The second book is called Homo Deus, which is about the effort that humans are making to turn themselves into gods. Amazing book. If you want to understand what's happening in technology and in culture in the world right now, I would totally recommend starting with *Sapiens* and then reading *Homo Deus*. So I think it's in that book about these metaphor sets. So yeah, so that's that. I'm going a little meta on your question right now because, but now to come back down into my metaphor set, which is a computer metaphor set. I think about my programming and how do I reprogram myself. It's actually pretty easy to do. When you've got an adaptive metaphor set like that, knowing that you can reprogram yourself, like memory is a great example. We know about memory and have for a good while now that you never access the same memory twice, that when you access a memory, you change it, which means that every time you go into the memory, every time you remember something, you have an opportunity to make it a little more joyful, you know? So it's like, if you remember somebody who like just triggered the shit out of you, or somebody who hurt you a lot, and as you bring up that memory, you just hold love, compassion. And then you switch to something else, the memory goes back down and you've reprogrammed it with love. And so now you just have less gugh in your body. I know a person who's developing a software system for doing exactly that, you know, using muscle testing to figure out where the places that you have built up gook, then guiding you into accessing that, and then reprogramming it with love or whatever. And then you move on to the next thing. And this is how, like once we have this understanding, once we have a valid metaphor set, it makes me wonder actually if when we make these technologies, if it's not, you know, I talk about, or Yuval Harari talks about, we interpret ourselves with a metaphor set out here that we've created. But I wonder to what degree it's the opposite, you know? I wonder to what degree it's like once we master some expression of being a human, we gain access to a new metaphor set in ourselves, which allows us to create something externally. You know, I wonder to what degree one causes the other, which is interesting because if that's true, then there's something fundamentally real about computing, more real about computing than computers. And there's something more fundamentally real about steam engines and pistons and pressure than steam engines and pistons and pressure, you know? And maybe there's something more fundamentally real about the blockchain and about computational learning and whatever the cutting edge is right now, about virtual reality. You know, virtual reality makes for a really great metaphor set, like putting on one reality and taking off another. Like what happens when you learn, we get so used to doing this that we learn to take off our realities, that it becomes so woven into our understanding of the world that I could be having a conversation with you and I can be like, hold on just a second, I'm just going to take off my reality for a second and witness you through a different reality, you know? And maybe that's not our technology informing us. Maybe that's actually us through thousands of years and through collaboration and so on, discovering deeper and deeper layers of truth and translating those layers of truth into our technium. Technium is a great word. Technium is a word from What Technology Wants by Kevin Kelly. You can probably intuit what it means from the word. It means like the kingdom of technology. If you think of the animal kingdom, the vegetable kingdom, the technium is the technical kingdom, the kingdom of technology.
That's amazing, bro. What an interesting few paragraphs to ponder. Metaphor sets. Can you know, I kind of understand it, but just I want to ask you, like, define metaphor set. Like, is it in relation to how we identify with the world? And I think, you know, my mind was going all over the place there, just thinking about it. And we're evolved. Consciousness in itself is this mysterious thing we haven't identified, and we have the physical world, which we've looked at scientifically, that disappears and reappears when you boil it right down. And you know, you've spoken in that middle part when I said, "What's the big picture?" And you're like, you know, am I even in this reality? What is this reality? And it's a very fascinating thing. And I think it's fascinating to be alive. And what I hope for—
Isn't it an amazing moment to be alive right now? Isn't it just amazing?
Yeah. And that's what I was hoping for, you know, to allow an experience in myself, because it's the only consciousness or reality that I can perceive. And it could be right or wrong or flawed or whatever, but it's only what I've experienced and am experiencing. So my question for myself is, how do I make this a very enjoyable experience? Make it fun, take risks, go explore the things I want, you know, have the courage to do those things. And I hope that this conversation just inspires people a little bit to, you know, awaken that in themselves a little bit, because it's personal responsibility. And the way that my mind went to so many different ways in this episode, man, and the application, the sincere and powerful application and potential in gaming for mindfulness, transformation, consciousness, accelerated learning on an individual, collective, communal scale is massive. And I just am so grateful for what you're doing and your intention and going out there, man. I appreciate you coming on the show. Is there anything that you wish that I had asked, or anything that you want to explore before we close it out? Because this has been amazing.
Well, thank you. I'm grateful for the conversation. You've been you're a joy to explore with. For those of you who don't know, which is all of you, we as Matt said, he starts the episode before we go in with a breath and sharing an intention. And my intention was to discover, because it's so easy when you do a lot of interviews just to kind of recite the same shit again and again, and that's just like not the way I want to do anything. So this has been so much discovery for me. And as such, there's nothing that I wish you'd ask me now, because I don't have an agenda. It's just been like a really joyful conversation. I'd in fact, I'd almost like not want to add any more to, because it's such we've gone so deep into a lot of different explorations, you know. So I'm just grateful for the opportunity to explore, and I'm really grateful. I hope that folks listening to this were, well, I mean, we all went into something together, and I'm grateful to have the people listening in on this. It's hard to describe, but they're a part of it, you know. I can feel it. 100%. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, dude. Well, yeah, same. Thanks everybody for listening. Where can people find more about you if they want to look at your work, if they want to try a SoundSelf, which is super cool? I invite everybody to check that out. I'm super excited about what you're going to bring in the future. And yeah, anybody out there that's hearing this in the tech space and anything like that, the potential for this, for using gaming to affect real change and real development through consciousness and mindset and empowering people. You know, that's why I do martial arts, is to empower myself. That's why you teach it to kids, to empower them, mind, body, spirit. More technologies around personal empowerment, understanding, self-worth, less disconnection, harm, and lack of compassion. You know, so there's a huge opportunity here, man. And I'm so excited to see what can come of this. What will come of it?
Yeah, me too, man. And it's like I like to think that I'm pretty well educated and well versed on certain topics, but the more educated and well versed I am, the more I'm just like, it's mysterious to me, you know, which is why it's so exciting to me to share with you, because like I don't come like, here are the answers, here's what I know, here's what's happening, you know. It's just like, wow, so much is happening, and there's so many interesting questions unfolding right now. I'll speak to, if people want to learn more about my work and about my company's work. My company is Andromeda Entertainment. We are a publishing company for video games that are designed to heighten a person's state of consciousness. And my project SoundSelf, which we talked about this, SoundSelf, you can find that at soundself.com. If you are a practitioner, like a psychedelic practitioner or a psychological practitioner, and you think this might be interesting to your work, please be in touch. We are starting a pilot program to explore this technology for healing settings. And the game is not out yet, but if you sign up to the mailing list on soundself.com, then we will let you know as soon as it's out. Matt, let's go ahead and just check first that there actually is a mailing list, because I keep sending people the mailing list, and it'd be awkward if it's not. SoundSelf.com.
If not, you better create one.
Yeah, I better create one soon, right? Let's see. Demo, awards, media, contact. Contact, yes. Yeah, there's a contact sheet right at the bottom. And a newsletter. Look at that. There is a newsletter. Okay, yes. So please reach out via that website, sign up to the newsletter, and we'll let you know when the experience is ready.
Awesome. Robin, my friend, it's so good to see you. It's so good to catch up and dive this deep with you. I'm wishing you all the best, man. Appreciate you and your work. So thanks so much for coming on the show.
Grateful to connect. Thank you.
All right. See you later. See you guys. Peace.